The transport ship ascended through bruised clouds, trailing a whisper of ionized air. It settled on the landing pad with a sigh of hydraulic pistons, its hull still shimmering from atmospheric entry. Around the landing zone, in what was once a prosperous coastal city, humans watched. They remembered the war, the screaming metal that fell from skies like this, and they did not welcome this arrival. He watched, too, from the doorway of his repair shop, a cup of bitter tea cooling in his hand. His name was not important. He was a man who fixed things that others broke, a skill learned in the trenches and honed in the uneasy peace. The ship's design was unfamiliar, sleek and silent, a vessel of the Celadon hegemony. The war had ended 10 years ago, not with triumph, but with a strained ceasefire. The blue-skinned Celadons had withdrawn, leaving a broken Earth to rebuild. The ship's ramp extended, a tongue of polished metal. Guards emerged first, tall and stern, their skin the color of a deep tropical sea, their eyes like chips of polished amber. They carried sleek rifles, not the brutal war clubs of a decade past, but deadly nonetheless. They formed a rigid corridor dot, then she descended. Her gown was a cascade of silver mesh, and her skin was the soft, luminous blue of a twilight sky. A circlet of cold light rested upon her brow. Her face was a masterpiece of serene authority, utterly unreadable. The whispers began among the human onlookers, a current of fear and resentment. A hegemony dignitary here? No. It was an insult. She moved with a glacial pace, her entourage a constellation around her star. Her gaze swept over the rusting rooftops, the patched-up infrastructure, the faces marked by a decade of hard recovery. There was no warmth in that look, only assessment. Her procession turned from the main thoroughfare and began moving down the secondary lane, directly toward the cluster of workshops. The crowd followed at a nervous distance. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. It was an impossible coincidence. He set his cup down, the ceramic tapping a frail note on the counter. The guards halted outside his shop. The blue-skinned woman paused, her eyes lifting to the faded sign above his door, then lowering to settle upon him. He stood still, meeting her gaze. A decade fell away in that moment. It was not a city, but a scorched forest. The air tasted of ozone and burnt resin. He was a scout, separated, his leg bleeding from shrapnel. He heard the soft, desperate cries not in his language. He found her in the wreckage of a hegemony skiff, a young cadet, her uniform torn, one arm bent wrong, her blue skin smeared with soot and something like ichor. Her large, amber eyes were wide with pain and terror. She saw him, a human soldier, and flinched, expecting the killing blow. He did not give it. He knelt. He used his last field dressing on her arm. He shared his water. He helped her from the wreckage as secondary explosions bloomed in the distance. They did not speak. They had no shared words. He pointed her toward the hegemony lines, away from the advancing human artillery. She looked back once, those amber eyes searing the moment into memory. Before vanishing into the smoke dot now, those same eyes held no memory, only cold command. The woman from the past, now a queen from the stars, stood before him. The crowd held its breath. "You," she said. Her voice was clear, amplified somehow, carrying over the silent street. It was a voice used to obedience. Human, he gave a single, slow nod. 10 cycles ago, she continued, the alien word for years, unfamiliar, yet understood. In the conflict. You were there. I was, he replied, his own voice rough, quiet. Her expression did not change. I remember a human. In the place of burning trees. He offered aid. He pointed away. Was it you? The hope that had flickered in his chest died at her tone. This was not a reunion. This was an interrogation. It was, he said. A murmur went through the humans. They knew his story. He had told few, but rumors had wings. The man who saved a Celadon. Some called him a traitor then. Most just called him a fool. The blue-skinned maiden took a step forward. Her guards tensed. The air grew thick. She looked down at him from the slight elevation of the street. Her next words fell like stones. Kneel, human. The silence that followed was absolute. The demand echoed. It was the posture of submission, of surrender. It was what the hegemony had demanded of Earth at the war's end, and Earth, bleeding but unbowed, had refused. To kneel now was to kneel for all. He felt every eye upon him. The weight of his people's history, their stubborn, painful survival, pressed on his shoulders. He saw the faces in the crowd, hard and angry. He saw the guards' fingers resting on their weapons. He saw her, a statue of celestial blue, waiting. He thought of the terrified young cadet in the woods. That being was gone. This was what remained. A product of the hegemony, where mercy was a weakness and gratitude, a footnote. His act of decency had been a personal choice, a rebellion against the madness of war. It was never an investment for future reward. He understood that now, completely. Slowly, he shook his head. No, amber eyes narrowed. You knelt then. I knelt to tend to a wounded soul, he said, his voice gaining strength. I do not kneel to power. Not to yours. Not to anyone's. You are bound by the ceasefire accords, she stated. My rank is Supreme Legate of the Celadon hegemony. You will show obeisance. The accords say nothing about kneeling, he countered. He took a small step forward, out of his shop doorway, onto the level street. He would not be looked down upon in his own home. They speak of mutual respect, of non-interference. This, he gestured at her, at the guards, is interference. A new tension, electric and dangerous, crackled in the air. The guards raised their rifles a fraction. The humans in the crowd shifted, a low growl of sound beginning to form. The legate studied him. The imperious mask did not slip, but something shifted behind her eyes. A calculation. You defy me? Before your people. You think this is bravery? It is the pride that burned your world. It is the pride that rebuilt it, he said, sweeping a hand toward the city. The same pride that made me help you. We chose not to become you, even when we could, even when it hurt. For the first time, there was a flicker in her regal composure. A tiny, almost imperceptible tightening at the corner of her mouth. The memory of the burning forest was in the room now, a ghost between them. The kind human hand. The shared, silent understanding of two creatures caught in a machine of destruction. The hegemony taught that such impulses were primitive, illogical. A human flaw. She had spent 10 years believing that. She had climbed the ranks by purging that memory, by adopting the cold logic of her people. She had returned to this backwater world to finally exorcise it, to force the living reminder of her past weakness into the ultimate act of submission. It was meant to be the final stitch closing an old wound. Yet the man did not kneel. He stood, worn and simple, a fixer of broken things, and he looked at her not with fear, but with a profound disappointment. It was that disappointment which pierced her armor more deeply than any weapon could. The silence stretched. The standoff held. Then she did something entirely unexpected, something not in the protocols of the hegemony. She turned her head slightly, addressing her guards without looking away from him. Lower your weapons. The guards hesitated, then complied, the barrels of their rifles dipping toward the ground. Her gaze returned to him. The command was gone from her posture. She was no longer a statue, but a being, present and conflicted. You speak of a choice, she said, her voice quieter, no longer amplified. A choice not to become like us. Yes, you made that choice in the forest. When you spared me, I did. She took a breath, a very human gesture. The hegemony has no category for such a choice. It is recorded as tactical error or emotional failure. She paused. I have spent cycles trying to classify it. Some things do not need classification, he said. They just are. The supreme legate of the Celadon hegemony stood amidst the ruins of a human city, facing the man who had saved her life. The script of conquest and submission had failed. Here was something else, something her culture had no name for. Forgiveness unasked? Integrity unbroken? It was a knot her logic could not untie. She did not ask him to kneel again. Instead, she gave a single, stiff nod, an acknowledgement from one equal to another. It was a gesture she had never made to a human. Your world is resilient, she said, the word foreign on her tongue. As are its people. Without another word, she turned. The silver hem of her gown whispered against the dusty pavement. She walked back up the lane, her guards falling in behind, confusion in their rigid steps. The ramp ascended, sealing the ship. The vessel lifted into the sky, silent as a thought, and was gone. The crowd remained, the tension dissolving into a buzz of confusion and relief. They looked at him, the repairman, who had faced down a celestial queen with nothing but a quiet no. He watched the sky where the ship had vanished. He felt no victory, only a deep, weary sadness. He had not saved the blue-skinned maiden 10 years ago. He had, perhaps, given her a seed of doubt. Today, that seed had faced the frost of her power and had not died. It was not a happy story. It was not a story of triumph. But it was a human story. And in the end, he had not knelt. He turned, went back into his shop, and picked up his cooling tea. The world outside continued, scarred but standing. He took a sip. It was enough.